The storm over New Orleans did not sound like weather. It sounded like a warning. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the Vale Royale Hotel. Thunder rolled over the Mississippi like a slow drum, and somewhere beneath the polished floors, behind the velvet curtains and gold-lit bars, a hidden river of dirty money was moving through the city. Nobody in the hotel lobby noticed it. The tourists kept laughing over their cocktails. The piano player kept his hands moving across the keys. The doormen kept smiling beneath black umbrellas. But high above them, in a quiet accounting office, where the lights were too bright and the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, Mara Bell found the number that was going to get her killed. She sat alone at her desk with her shoes kicked off under the chair, her dark hair twisted into a loose knot, her soft, round body wrapped in a plain navy cardigan that had seen too many late nights. At Vale Maritime and Hospitality, people liked to pretend she was part of the furniture. They walked past her desk when they needed reports, approvals, quiet fixes, or someone to explain why their budgets did not make sense. Then they forgot her again, the second they got what they wanted. Mara had learned to live inside that kind of silence. She had learned to lower her voice, keep snacks hidden in her drawer, and smile politely when thin women from marketing talked about discipline while staring at her lunch. She was fat, and in the beautiful, cruel world of luxury hotels and expensive riverfront restaurants that made people think she was harmless. That was their first mistake. Mara was not harmless. She was careful. She was patient. She knew how money lied. She knew how a fake invoice could dress itself up as a catering expense, how a shipping fee could hide a payoff, how a casino transfer could move through 7 clean accounts before coming out smelling like honest profit. For 3 years, she had worked beside Nico Vale's empire, balancing the clean books of Vale Maritime and Hospitality, while quietly noticing the darker shadows beneath them. Publicly, Vale owned hotels, restaurants, boat contracts, and half the riverfront businesses people loved to photograph at sunset. Privately, every bartender, driver, and councilman in New Orleans whispered the same thing when Nico's name came up. Nico Vale did not just own businesses, he owned fear. Mara had never asked questions she did not want answered. She had seen men with bruised faces step out of Nico's private elevator. She had watched entire rooms fall silent when he walked in, wearing one of his dark suits, his black hair combed back, his face calm in a way that never felt gentle. Nico was not loud. He did not need to be. He had a slow, controlled way of looking at people that made them confess before he even spoke. Mara had spent 3 years handing him audit folders and revenue summaries, always careful to keep her fingers from shaking when his hand brushed hers. He noticed everything. That was what scared her most. Not the rumors, not the guards, not the hidden doors in the hotel basement. It was the feeling that Nico Vale saw too much. Still, even Nico had missed this. Mara leaned closer to the screen, her tired eyes narrowing as she checked the casino transfers again. The numbers were wrong, but not in the obvious way a lazy thief might make them wrong. They were almost perfect. A block of funds had been moved through a private hospitality ledger, disguised as seasonal revenue from the hotel's gaming partnerships, then split across shipping insurance, supplier refunds, and renovation expenses. To anyone else, it looked like normal money flowing through a large company with too many moving parts. To Mara, it looked like a handprint pressed into wet cement. Her heart began to beat harder. She opened the private ledger again, then ran a cross-match against the Gulf shipping contracts. The same vendor name appeared in 4 places it had no reason to appear. Bellefleur Imports. A pretty name, a fake name. She checked the registration, then the routing number, then the offshore holding account attached to it. Her stomach tightened as the pattern unfolded on the screen. The money was not coming from hotel profits. It was not coming from shipping fees. It was being washed through Vale's accounts from the outside, pushed in by someone bold enough to use Nico's own empire like a sink. Mara whispered one name before she fully understood why. Marcel Vautrin. Every person in New Orleans who valued breathing knew that name. Marcel was old money turned rotten, a crime lord with polished manners, cold eyes, and a habit of smiling at people right before their lives fell apart. He controlled pieces of the French Quarter, had friends in places where police reports disappeared, and had been trying for years to take Nico's river routes. If this ledger was real, Marcel was no longer pushing from the outside. He had gotten inside Vale. Mara sat back, suddenly aware of how empty the office was. The cleaning crew had finished an hour ago. The junior accountants had gone home before the worst of the rain. Even the security guard on her floor had stopped making his usual slow walk past the glass doors. The only sounds were the storm, the hum of the air vents, and the soft click of her own breathing. She should have called Nico. The thought made her hand freeze over the keyboard. Calling Nico Vale at midnight to tell him a rival crime lord was using his company to wash money felt like stepping willingly into a room with no exits. But doing nothing was worse. If Marcel had a person inside the company, then anyone who saw this ledger was already in danger, and now Mara had not only seen it. She had opened it, copied it, followed it, and understood it. Her fingers moved before fear could stop them. She pulled a small encrypted drive from her keychain and plugged it into the side of her computer. The blue light blinked once, calm and innocent, as if it had no idea what kind of secret it was about to hold. Mara copied the ledger, the routing paths, the false vendor files, the hidden casino transfers, and every note she had made. The progress bar crawled across the screen, while thunder shook the windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. Then the office door opened. It was a soft sound, just a click, just the pressure change of a door being pushed open somewhere down the hall. But to Mara, it landed like a hand around her throat. She stopped breathing. There should have been no one there. The copy finished. Mara yanked the drive free and closed her fist around it so tightly the plastic bit into her palm. She shut down the ledger window, grabbed her purse, and stood too fast, knocking her chair backward into the filing cabinet. The noise cracked through the office. She winced, then listened. Footsteps moved beyond the frosted glass. Slow, heavy, not the tired shuffle of a janitor, not the smooth stride of Nico's usual men. Whoever was out there was trying to be quiet and failing. Mara stepped around her desk, her bare feet cold against the floor. Her shoes were still under the chair, but she did not reach for them. Something inside her, something older than thought, told her there was no time. She slipped through the side door into the records room, then pushed past shelves of archived contracts toward the narrow service corridor used by staff who did not belong in guest spaces. The hotel had an elegant face, all chandeliers and old southern charm, but behind it ran a hidden body of plain hallways, laundry chutes, freight elevators, storage rooms, and locked doors that Mara knew better than most executives. Everyone ignored those spaces. Mara never had. She moved through them now with her heart pounding so hard it made her dizzy. The lights flickered above her. Rainwater rattled inside the old pipes. Somewhere behind her, a door slammed open. "Mara Bell," a man called, his voice low and almost amused. "You made this harder than it needed to be." She clutched the drive and ran. Her breath came fast. Her body was not made for graceful running, and fear made every step feel clumsy. But she knew the hotel better than the men chasing her. She cut through laundry, down a concrete stairwell, past the kitchen storage, and into the underground valet level, where the air smelled of oil, rain, and river mud. Her car was parked near the far wall, a small silver sedan that suddenly looked impossibly far away. She was almost there when two men stepped out from behind a black SUV. Mara stopped so sharply her feet slid on the wet concrete. The men were strangers, both dressed in dark raincoats, both wearing smiles that made her skin crawl. One was tall and narrow with pale eyes. The other was heavier, with a shaved head and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Neither looked surprised to see her. They had known exactly where she would run. The tall one lifted his hand. "Easy, sweetheart. We just need the drive." Mara backed up one step. "I don't know what you're talking about." The heavier man laughed, and the sound echoed across the empty valet level. "Don't do that. Don't play smart now. You already proved you're smart, didn't you?" His eyes moved over her body in a slow, ugly way. "Though I have to admit, Marcel said you were quick. I expected someone a little more athletic." The words hit a place Mara hated. That old soft wound she spent years pretending had healed. The school hallways, the office whispers, the way people looked at her in restaurants when she ordered dessert. Her fear twisted with shame until it was almost hard to stand. The tall man stepped closer. "Give us the drive, and you walk away." Mara's hand tightened around it inside her purse. "No." His smile vanished. The heavier man's voice turned cold. "Girl, you are not built for this kind of trouble. Don't make us chase you around this garage." Mara's mouth went dry. Every part of her wanted to cry, to apologize, to hand over the drive and beg them to leave her alone. But she saw the numbers again in her mind, the accounts, the routes, the proof. If she gave it up, Marcel would keep bleeding Vale from the inside. Nico would never see the knife until it was already in his back. And Mara Bell, the quiet fat accountant nobody respected, would spend the rest of her life knowing she had folded at the first cruel word. So she lifted her chin. "You picked the wrong accountant," she said, and her voice only shook a little. The heavier man lunged. Mara stumbled back, but he was too fast. His hand closed around her throat and slammed her against the side of a parked car. Pain flashed down her neck. Her purse fell, spilling papers across the wet concrete. She clawed at his wrist as he leaned in close, his breath hot and sour. "Last chance," he said. "Where is it?" Before Mara could answer, the lights went out. The whole valley level dropped into darkness. For one thin second, there was nothing but rain, breath, and the distant groan of the storm drains. Then a new sound entered the dark. Slow footsteps, calm footsteps, the kind that did not hurry because they already owned the room. A voice spoke from the shadows. "Take your hand off her." The man holding Mara went still. The emergency lights flickered on, washing the garage in dim red. Nico Vale stood near the entrance ramp, rain dripping from the shoulders of his black coat, his face carved from shadow and fury. Two of his guards stood behind him, but they did not move. They did not need to. Nico's eyes were fixed on the hand around Mara's neck, and something in his expression made the air feel suddenly thin. The tall man reached inside his coat. Nico moved first. It was fast, clean, and terrifying in its control. He crossed the space like the storm itself had chosen a body, knocked the weapon from the tall man's hand, and dropped him to the floor with one brutal strike. The heavier man released Mara and turned, but Nico caught him by the collar and drove him hard against the concrete pillar. The sound made Mara flinch. Nico leaned close and said something too quiet for her to hear. Whatever it was, the man's face drained of color. Then Nico let his guards take them. Mara slid down the side of the car, coughing, one hand pressed to her bruised throat. She had known the rumors were true. Some part of her had always known. But knowing was different from seeing Nico Vale standing in the red emergency glow, with violence still humming around him, his expensive coat wet from the rain, his eyes dark with a rage that did not look businesslike at all. He turned to her. The rage broke. For one strange moment, he looked almost afraid. "Mara," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded softer than it should have. He knelt in front of her, not caring about the dirty water soaking into his trousers. "Did they hurt you?" She tried to answer, but her throat burned. She shook her head, then winced, because even that hurt. Nico's jaw tightened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers brushed the side of her neck, with a gentleness that made her eyes sting worse than the pain. "Look at me," he said quietly. Mara looked. His face was close now, close enough for her to see the rain on his lashes, and the small scar near his mouth she had noticed 100 times across conference tables. He was not looking at her like an employee. He was not even looking at her like the person who had found evidence worth millions. He was looking at her like the bruise on her throat was a personal betrayal by the world. "I found something," she whispered. "I know. The money was moving through the casino ledger. Marcel is using your accounts. I copied the proof." "I know," Nico said again, and his voice dropped lower. "And right now, I do not care about the money." Mara blinked at him. "You don't care?" "I care that they touched you." The words settled between them, heavy and impossible. Mara looked away because she did not know what to do with them. She had spent most of her life training herself not to expect tenderness, especially not from men who looked like Nico Vale. Men like him chose women who glowed in silk dresses and laughed without covering their mouths. They did not kneel on wet concrete in front of women like Mara Bell. They did not look at soft arms, wide hips, and a body built outside the narrow rules of beauty as if those things were worth protecting. "They laughed at me," she said before she could stop herself. Her voice cracked. "They said I wasn't built for this. People always think that when they look at me." Nico's hand went still against her neck. Then he looked over his shoulder at the men being dragged toward the waiting SUV. His expression turned so cold that Mara almost wished she had not said it. When he faced her again, his voice was controlled, but barely. "They came for you because you saw what men with guns and money could not see. They were afraid of your mind, Mara, not your body." She let out a shaky breath. Nico reached for her purse, picked up the scattered papers, and found the encrypted drive near the tire of her car. He held it in his palm for a moment, then closed his fist around it. "This is valuable," he said. Mara swallowed. "Yes." Then he slipped the drive into his coat and looked back at her. "But you are not staying here one more minute. Nico, I can go home." "No." The word was quiet, but final. Mara tried to stand on her own, pride pushing through the fear, but her legs trembled. Nico saw it. He stood and offered his hand. She stared at it, unsure whether taking it meant safety or surrender, maybe both. Finally, she placed her hand in his. His grip closed around hers, warm and steady. He helped her up carefully, as if her softness did not make her weak, as if her weight did not trouble him, as if she were something precious that had almost been stolen. When she swayed, his arm came around her waist. Mara stiffened, embarrassed by the fullness of her body against him, but Nico did not step back. If anything, his hold became firmer. "You're safe," he said near her ear. Mara wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Outside, the storm had turned the city silver. Nico guided her into the back of a black car, and the hotel disappeared behind them as they drove through streets shining with rain. New Orleans looked half dreaming through the tinted glass. Gas lamps flickered in the quarter. Oak branches dragged across the sky. The Mississippi moved dark and swollen beyond the levee, carrying secrets toward the Gulf. Mara sat beside Nico in silence, her hands wrapped around themselves in her lap. Every few minutes, she felt his gaze shift to the bruises on her neck. Each time, the air in the car grew colder. The Garden District mansion waited behind iron gates and old trees, its white columns glowing through the rain. Guards opened the gate before the car stopped. More men stood beneath the porch, alert and silent, their eyes moving over the street, the windows, the storm itself. The house should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. But there was something hidden under that beauty, something guarded and old, like the city had built one of its secrets into a home. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood, rain, and fresh roses. Nico led Mara through a long hallway to a private sitting room, where a fire burned low in a marble hearth. He told someone to bring tea, ice, and the medical kit. His voice was calm again, but nobody in the room mistook calm for peace. Mara sat on the edge of a deep green sofa, feeling suddenly aware of her damp cardigan, bare feet, and trembling hands. The room was too elegant for her. Nico was too close. The night was too strange. She had walked into work as an accountant and ended up inside the guarded home of the most feared man in the South. Nico knelt in front of her again with the medical kit beside him. "You don't have to do that," she murmured. "Yes," he said, opening a small packet of ointment. "I do." He tended to the bruises on her neck with slow, careful hands. Mara stared at the fire because looking at him was too much. The tenderness made her feel exposed. Violence she could understand. Cruelty she had survived. But this quiet attention, this focus that had nothing to do with the ledger in his coat, reached places in her she had spent years locking away. "You should be asking about the files," she said. "I will. But not now." His fingers paused under her chin. "Not while you're shaking." Mara gave a small, broken laugh. "That's not very Mafia Boss of you." For the first time that night, Nico almost smiled. It was faint and gone quickly, but it changed his whole face. You have a very narrow idea of what I am. I think tonight widened it. His eyes lifted to hers, and the firelight made them look almost black. Good. A staff member brought tea and left without a sound. Nico handed Mara the cup, watching until she took a sip. The warmth helped, so did the silence. After a while, he stood and walked to the small desk near the window, where he connected the encrypted drive to a secure laptop. Mara followed him with her eyes, nerves returning as lines of data began filling the screen. Nico called in 2 men she recognized from the office. One was his head of security, the other handled internal legal matters for Vale. Julian Cross. Polished, handsome, and always smiling like he knew the answer before anyone asked the question. Mara had never trusted him, but she had never trusted most men who wore pocket squares on a normal Tuesday. Julian entered the room wearing a cream suit under a raincoat, his blonde hair still perfect despite the storm. His eyes flicked to Mara on the sofa, to the bruises on her neck, then to Nico. "What happened?" Julian asked. "Marcel sent men after her," Nico said without looking away from the screen. Julian's face tightened in what looked like concern. "My God. Mara, are you all right?" Mara nodded, but something felt wrong. It was tiny, almost nothing, a breath too late, a glance too quick toward the laptop. Her mind, tired and frightened as it was, caught the pattern. Nico's security man began reading the files aloud. Casino revenue, false vendor routes, cargo insurance, private dock access, stolen diamonds, forged passports, cash broken down into restaurant deposits, the whole secret body of Marcel's operation, moving beneath Vale's clean skin. Then Julian said, "That can't be right." Everyone looked at him. He gave a soft laugh and adjusted his cuff. "I only mean, Mara is talented, of course, but this is a complicated system. We should verify before we assume Marcel has that kind of access." Mara felt the room tilt. There it was. Not a confession, not even close. Just the smallest wrong note in a careful song. Nico turned slowly from the laptop. "I didn't say he had access." Julian went still. The rain tapped against the windows. The fire shifted in the hearth. Mara held her tea with both hands and felt the chill move through the room despite the flames. Nico's voice became very soft. "How did you know that was the part we had not found yet?" Julian smiled, but this time it did not reach his eyes. And Mara Bell, still shaking, still bruised, still wrapped in a cardigan damp from the storm, understood with sudden perfect clarity that finding the dirty money had only opened the first door. The real betrayal had been standing beside Nico all along. Julian Cross smiled like a man who had spent his whole life learning how to stand beside danger without ever looking afraid. For a breath, nobody moved. The rain touched the windows in soft, restless taps, and the fire gave a low crackle behind Mara, but the room itself felt sealed and airless. Nico stood near the laptop with one hand resting on the edge of the desk, his eyes fixed on the man who had been his legal advisor, his oldest friend, and the polished voice of Vale Maritime and Hospitality. For more years than Mara had worked there, the silence between them carried history, money, secrets, and something far worse than anger. It carried disappointment. Julian lifted both hands slowly. "Nico, you're tired. We all are. She was attacked, the files are a mess, and you're hearing ghosts in every word." Nico did not blink. "You said Marcel had access before anyone in this room said the word access." Julian's smile thinned, because that is the obvious concern. Mara set her tea down. Her hands were still trembling, but her mind had found the quiet, sharp place it always went when numbers turned into lies. "No," she said softly. "It was not obvious. The obvious concern was that Marcel pushed money through outside vendors. Access means someone inside Vale opened the door." Julian's gaze slid to her, and for the first time since she had known him, the charm vanished from his face. His eyes became flat and cold. "You really should have stayed in your little office, Mara." The room changed instantly. Nico moved so fast Mara barely saw it. One moment Julian was standing near the doorway, with his expensive raincoat dripping onto the rug. The next, Nico had him pinned against the wall, with one hand twisted in the front of his perfect cream suit. The guard stepped forward, but Nico lifted his other hand, stopping them without looking away from Julian. "Say one more word to her like that," Nico whispered, "and friendship will be the smallest thing you lose tonight." Julian swallowed. His face had gone pale, but there was still pride in him, still the strange bitterness of a man who believed he had been cheated by the world. "You think she saved you? Look at her. She got lucky with a spreadsheet. Marcel knew you were weak, Nico. He knew you were distracted. Everyone knows. 3 years of you watching some fat accountant walk around your hotel like she was made of glass. It was embarrassing." Mara flinched before she could stop herself. Nico noticed. His grip tightened so hard the fabric of Julian's suit began to tear. Julian gave a breathless laugh. "There it is. That is exactly what I mean. The great Nico Vale, feared from Baton Rouge to the Gulf, ready to burn his whole house down because someone hurt the feelings of a woman who hides behind cardigans and audit folders." Nico leaned closer, his voice dropping into something so calm it became frightening. "Mara found in one night what you helped hide for months." Julian's face changed again, just a twitch near his mouth, but it was enough. Nico saw it. Mara saw it too. The truth had stepped into the light, and now there was no pretending it was only a shadow. Nico released him with a shove. Julian stumbled, caught himself on the arm of a chair, and straightened his jacket with shaking fingers. The room was full of armed men, yet somehow, the most dangerous thing in it was Mara's quiet certainty. She rose from the sofa, her knees felt weak, but she stayed standing. "Marcel used Bellefleur Imports to move diamonds through the hotel procurement accounts," she said. "The forged passports were buried under guest security upgrades. The cash was layered through restaurant revenue, but the signature pattern on the transfer approvals was wrong. It was too clean, too legal, too careful. That was you." Julian stared at her with open hatred. "You have no idea what men like us build." "No," Mara said, "but I know what men like you steal." For a moment, thunder swallowed the room. Then Julian broke. Not loudly, not with sobbing or begging. He simply exhaled, and the polished mask slipped from his face like wet paper. "Marcel offered me half the river routes," he said. "Half. After everything I gave this company. After years of standing beside you while men trembled at your name, I still had to ask permission before making a move. You treated me like a useful tool." Nico's expression hardened. "You were my friend." "I was your shadow," Julian snapped. And then she came in, quiet little Mara with her big eyes and bigger body, and suddenly you cared where she parked, who spoke to her, whether she ate dinner, whether executives laughed after meetings. You thought nobody noticed. You were wrong. Marcel noticed. I noticed. She became the soft place in your armor. Mara could not breathe for a second. Her eyes moved to Nico. He did not deny it. He did not even look ashamed. Julian saw her expression and smiled cruelly. "Oh, you didn't know. That is almost sweet." Nico stepped forward again, but Mara lifted a hand. Something in her needed to hear the rest, even if it hurt. Julian's smile widened. "He has been protecting you since your first month at Vale. Your mother's hospital debt, paid through a foundation that does not exist. That executive who made a joke about your weight at the Christmas dinner. His career ended 2 weeks later. The landlord who tried to raise your rent illegally. He sold the building before sunrise. Nico Vale has been moving pieces around you for years, and you never even saw the board." Mara felt the room tilt beneath her. Memories flashed in soft, strange fragments. Bills that vanished, cruel men who suddenly left town, problems that dissolved before they could break her. She had thought the world had finally become a little kinder in small, random ways. But it had been Nico, quiet, terrifying Nico, shaping the dark around her without ever asking for thanks. Nico's face had gone unreadable. "Enough," Julian laughed once. "You want the refinery? Fine. Marcel's next shipment is at the old sugar refinery beyond the parish road. Diamonds, passports and cash. He will be there until midnight. You can still catch him, if you run." Mara looked at Nico, and the fear that moved through her now was different. It was not fear of Julian, it was fear of the way his confession had been too easy. Nico turned to his head of security. Lock him downstairs. No calls, no visitors. The guards seized Julian, but as they dragged him past Mara, he leaned just close enough for her to hear. You are smart, he whispered. So ask yourself why Marcel wanted me to give up the refinery. The words slid under her skin like cold water. Nico was already moving. Orders filled the room. Men gathered weapons. Engines started beyond the windows, and the mansion shifted from quiet shelter into war. Mara followed him into the hall, her bare feet silent against the wood. Nico, she said. He stopped. It feels too simple. His eyes softened when he looked at her, even with battle already burning behind them. I know. Then don't go. I have to. Mara hated how gently he said it. She hated how much she understood. Marcel had moved through Nico's company, touched his home, sent men after her, and turned his closest friend against him. A man like Nico did not survive by letting an insult breathe. He stepped closer and touched the bruise on her neck with the back of his fingers. You stay inside the house. Every door locks from the command room. The guards know the safe routes. No one gets near you. Mara searched his face. You're not listening. Julian wanted you to hear about the refinery. I am listening, Nico said. That is why I am leaving half my men here. It may not be enough. His mouth tightened. Then use that mind they are all so afraid of. The words stayed with her as he left. She watched through the front windows as the black cars rolled through the iron gates and disappeared into the storm. The mansion felt larger after he was gone, larger and older, the kind of house that remembered every secret ever spoken inside it. For a while, nothing happened. Mara sat in the sitting room with a blanket around her shoulders, while men moved quietly through the halls. The storm weakened, then grew wild again. The power flickered twice. Somewhere far away, maybe beyond the city, thunder folded over the land. She tried to focus on the files Nico had left open on a secure tablet, but Julian's last whisper kept returning. Ask yourself why Marcel wanted me to give up the refinery. Then the lights died. This time, they did not come back. The mansion fell into a dark so complete that Mara heard her own breath before she heard the first shout. A crash came from the east side of the house. Then another. Gunfire cracked somewhere outside, muffled by the walls and rain. A guard ran past the sitting room door, speaking fast into his radio, and then his voice cut off with a burst of static. Mara stood. Her body wanted to freeze. It wanted to wait for someone stronger, someone trained, someone with a gun and a hard face. But waiting had almost killed her in the garage. Waiting was what men like Marcel expected women like her to do. She grabbed the tablet and ran. The house was almost impossible to navigate in the dark, but Mara had spent 3 years reading floor plans, repair budgets, renovation files, and insurance documents for every Vale property. Nico's mansion had once been 3 houses joined together over generations. Its beauty hid a strange maze of sealed doors, service halls, old wine storage, and security upgrades layered over antique bones. Most people saw marble and oil paintings. Mara saw systems. She reached the rear hall as the emergency lights glowed dim red. Men were shouting in the lower wing. Someone was trying to force the interior gate near the garden corridor. Mara turned away from the noise and moved toward the old wine vault Nico had told her about earlier, the secure room hidden behind a plain door near the cellar stairs. Her lungs burned. Her bare feet slipped against the cold floor. Twice she almost fell, but she kept moving. A man stepped into the hall ahead of her. He was dressed in black, his face covered, a weapon in his hand. Mara stopped so quickly, pain shot up her legs. For one awful second, they stared at each other. Then the hallway gate slammed down between them. The man jerked back, startled. Mara looked at the tablet in her hands and realized her shaking thumb had opened the emergency security panel. She had hit the gate control without even meaning to. The man raised his weapon, but the gate was reinforced steel. His shot sparked against the bars. Mara turned and ran harder. By the time she reached the wine vault, the mansion was alive with alarms. She shoved open the hidden door, stumbled inside, and slammed it shut behind her. The lock sealed with a deep mechanical sound that felt like a heartbeat under the floor. The vault was cold, narrow, and lined with old brick. But it was no longer only a wine room. Nico had turned it into a secure space, with monitors, backup power, communications, and a command console built into one wall. Mara set the tablet down and stared at the screens as they blinked awake one by one. The house appeared in front of her as a map of glowing lines. Doors, gates, cameras, fire systems, power panels, floodlights, hallway locks, all the hidden pieces people forgot until danger arrived. A laugh shook out of her, breathless and terrified. "You picked the wrong accountant," she whispered again. Then she went to work. The attackers were inside the lower east wing, moving in pairs. Marcel's men had cut the main power, but they had not understood the old backup circuits. Mara locked the garden corridor doors behind them, trapping them in a narrow passage with no windows. She activated floodlights in the rear courtyard, blinding the men trying to cross the lawn. She sealed the service stairwell, opened the west side alarm vents, and sent a false access signal to the front gate, pulling 2 attackers away from the house and into the open drive where Nico's remaining guards were waiting. The radio on the console hissed. A voice came through, low and tense. "Safe room, identify." Mara grabbed the microphone. "This is Mara Bell. I'm in the vault." A pause. "Miss Bell, stay hidden." "No," she said, watching 2 men force their way into the blue hallway near the cellar. "Duck." "What?" "Duck now." She slammed her hand onto the fire control override. A second later, the corridor outside the vault filled with thick white chemical foam from ceiling vents that had been installed decades ago to protect stored wine from electrical fires. The men on the screen disappeared into the cloud, stumbling, choking, dropping their weapons as the floor turned slick beneath them. Nico's guards swore over the radio, then laughed once in pure disbelief. "Miss Bell," he said, coughing, "remind me never to upset you." Mara did not smile. Her hands were moving too fast. She followed the attack through the screens, reading movement like ledgers. Every person left a pattern. Every trap had a cost. Every door was a number. Every hallway was a route. She could not fight like Nico. She could not break bones or stand unshaken in gunfire. But she could see a system and make it turn against the people who misunderstood it. By the time Nico returned, the attack had already failed. His convoy tore through the gates just before dawn. Mara saw him on the monitor, stepping out into the wet drive before the car had fully stopped. He moved like a man who had outrun death and brought some of it back with him. His coat was torn, his hands were marked, his face was pale with a fear he did not bother hiding. He reached the vault door minutes later. "Mara," he called. She unlocked it with numb fingers. The moment the door opened, Nico pulled her into his arms. Not gently at first, desperately, like he had spent the whole drive back imagining every terrible thing Marcel could have done. Mara stiffened only for a second, then folded into him, burying her face against his chest as the last of her strength left her. "I thought I lost you," he said into her hair. "You didn't." His arms tightened. "I saw the cameras. You saved the house." "I used the buttons. You used your mind." She closed her eyes. "You knew about the refinery." "It was half empty," Nico said. "A trap, like you thought. Marcel wanted me gone." Mara pulled back slowly. "Then where is he?" Nico's expression darkened. "That is what I need to find out." But Mara already knew where to look. After the guards cleared the halls and the power came back in soft golden waves, she stayed in the vault with the files, the attack logs, and Julian's confession turning over in her head. Marcel had never meant to win at the mansion. He had meant to create panic, split Nico's men, and buy himself just enough time to disappear. Mara opened the fake accounts again and followed the last transfer. Not the big amounts. Those were meant to be found. She followed the smallest fee, a dull little docking charge hidden under fuel services. It led to a private river terminal south of the city, one owned through 3 shell companies and a dead man's trust. A luxury yacht had been cleared to leave before sunrise. She found Nico in the ruined front hall, speaking to his men beneath the broken chandelier. "He's running," she said. Everyone turned. Mara walked toward Nico with the tablet in her hands and her blanket slipping from one shoulder. Her hair was loose now, her face tired, her neck bruised, her body aching from fear and cold. But nobody in that hall looked through her, not one man. She handed Nico the tablet. "Private river terminal. He leaves before dawn." Nico looked at the screen, then he looked at her, and something in his face shifted. Not surprise, not even admiration, recognition, as if the truth had finally become too large for him to hide. "Come with me," he said. His men went still. Mara did too. "What?" Nico stepped closer. "You found him. You end this with me." The river terminal sat under a sky turning grey at the edges. Fog clung to the water, and the last of the storm moved east, leaving the air wet and silver. Marcel's yacht waited at the dock, white and sleek and glowing with false innocence. Men moved crates across the ramp, with the hurried panic of rats leaving a sinking ship. Nico's people surrounded the terminal before Marcel knew they were there. There was shouting, then running, then the quiet, efficient collapse of an empire that had believed itself untouchable. By the time Mara stepped onto the dock beside Nico, Marcel Vautrin was standing near the yacht with his hands half raised and hatred burning in his elegant face. He looked older than Mara expected, not weak, never that, but smaller somehow without shadows to hide in. His eyes landed on her and his mouth curved. "This is what brought me down? The fat accountant?" Nico's voice cut through the fog. "No, that is who saw you clearly." Marcel laughed, but it sounded thin. "You always did have strange taste, Nico." Nico did not look away from him. "And you always mistook quiet women for empty rooms." Mara felt the words move through her like warmth after a long winter. She stepped forward, the tablet held against her chest. "Your accounts are already copied to federal servers, city prosecutors, and every rival you cheated. The diamonds are tagged, the passports are logged, your escape route is gone." Marcel's smile faded. She kept going, her voice steady now. "You did not lose because Nico was stronger. You lost because you thought people like me only count other people's money. You forgot, we also remember where it goes." For the first time, Marcel had nothing to say. Nico gave one quiet order, and the dock filled with movement. Marcel's men were taken, his crates were opened, his yacht became evidence instead of escape. The network he had built in secret began to fall apart before the sun had fully touched the river. When it was over, Nico and Mara returned to the mansion in silence. The storm had cleared by then. Morning spread over New Orleans in pale gold, catching on wet leaves, iron gates, and the white columns of the Garden District house. The city looked washed clean, though Mara knew better now. Nothing in New Orleans was ever clean all the way through. It was only beautiful enough to make people forget to look beneath the surface. She stood on the back balcony wrapped in one of Nico's coats, watching the clouds break over the rooftops. Her body hurt, her throat was bruised, her feet were sore, but somewhere inside her, a lock had opened. Nico came to stand beside her. For a while, he said nothing. Then he reached into his coat and handed her a folder. Mara looked down at it. Inside were records, medical payments, legal settlements, quiet interventions. All the small miracles Julian had named, proof of every invisible hand Nico had placed between her and harm. Her chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nico looked out at the city. "Because I had no right to ask you to care for a man like me." "But you had the right to rearrange my life from the shadows." A faint, sad smile touched his mouth. "No, I did not." That honesty almost hurt worse than a lie. Mara closed the folder. "You should have trusted me." "I know. I am not fragile, Nico." He turned then, fully facing her. The morning light softened the hard lines of his face but did not make him look less dangerous. Nothing could. "No," he said. "You are not fragile. You are the reason I still have an empire." Mara's throat tightened. I don't want to be hidden anymore. Then don't be. The words were simple, but they opened a door wider than anything he could have offered her. Not safety, not money, not worship, choice. Nico stepped closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she wanted. She did not. You are no longer my employee, he said. No more hiding behind locked office doors. No more letting small people teach you to shrink. Stand beside me, Mara, not behind me, not beneath me, beside me, as my partner, my equal, the woman who saved everything I built. Mara looked at him for a long time. She thought of the girl she had been, learning to laugh softly so nobody noticed her. She thought of every office whisper, every cruel smile, every room where she had made herself smaller just to survive. Then she thought of the garage, the vault, the river terminal, and Marcel Vautrin's face when he finally understood that the woman he mocked had already taken him apart. A slow warmth moved through her. I will stand beside you, she said, but I will never belong to your shadow. Nico's eyes burned with something fierce and tender. Then I will step into the light with you. Mara smiled, and it felt new on her face. Not shy, not apologetic, not the careful smile of a woman trying to be accepted. It was the smile of a woman who had finally seen her own reflection without shame. Nico took her hand and lifted it to his mouth, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, with a devotion that made the morning feel still. Below them, the city woke slowly. Cars moved through wet streets. Church bells rang somewhere far away. The river carried the last of the storm toward the sea. By noon, the underworld of New Orleans had already heard the truth. Marcel Vautrin was finished. Julian Cross had vanished into the kind of silence only Nico Vale could create. Vale Maritime and Hospitality still stood, brighter and cleaner on the outside than ever before. But inside the hidden rooms, around the private tables, and along the dangerous routes that fed the south, men no longer spoke only of Nico. They spoke of Mara Bell, the fat forensic accountant who saw the lie in the ledger, the woman who turned a mansion into a trap, the mind that found a fleeing king before dawn, the quiet body everyone had mocked until it became the shape of their downfall. And when Nico Vale walked into his riverfront hotel that evening, with Mara beside him in a deep blue dress made to fit every soft inch of her without apology, the lobby fell silent in a way it never had for her before. Not with pity, not with judgment, with respect. Mara did not lower her eyes. She walked beside the most feared mafia boss in New Orleans, not as his rescued accountant, not as his secret obsession, and not as a fragile woman hidden behind his power. She walked as the power beside him, and for the first time in her life, Mara Bell let the whole city look.